okay at the back? It's all right? There are 3 more seats down here. Well, this is kind of overwhelming. And I want to thank Kresimer for his masterful survey of the field of visual studies, visual culture. I know a lot of people in this room who've been working in this area for many years now. So it feels like I'm not in a strange place. I'm not in Zagreb. I'm very much at home. And I want to welcome all of you who come from all over Europe to attend this conference. I have a short preamble about my sense of visual culture or visual studies as an academic discipline. It strikes me that one of the most important things we can say about visual studies and its relation to the academy in a space like this is that visual culture is also a non-academic, non-discipline. Like language, like storytelling, like any other cultural activity, it is not just an academic matter. It permeates the entire sphere of social activity, from entertainment to daily life, to media, to the immediate conditions of human existence. So, for me, one of the first essay I ever wrote about visual culture was to try to describe it as an indiscipline. That is, a place where disciplines met their boundaries. Art history, of course, especially, but also media studies. At the same time, I think there's something very specific and particular, a real object at the core of visual studies, and that is what Kresimer has just masterfully described as the encounter of vision and visuality. That is, we share the visual field with other organisms, non-human organisms. Vision transcends the human. It goes into the animal kingdom. As John Berger said long ago in his wonderful book, Ways of Seeing, we encounter the animal across a field unbridged by language, but definitely bridged by vision. We see the same world as the primates, to some extent. It's not perhaps coded in the same way. For sure it's not coded in the same way, but nevertheless there is something in common. And this is why visual studies also engages with the science of optics and with the mechanism of optical perception, as well as images, works of art, and the most refined products of the visual imagination. So it does strike me at a time when everybody is worried about the humanities and their relation to the non-academic world. And all the money in the world is going into science and technology and not into the humanities. It seems to me visual studies is one of the places where the humanities can most readily communicate with the rest of the world. People may not be reading that much, but they certainly are looking at a lot of things. So I could go on and on with this, but I think Kresimer has surveyed the field so beautifully. I'm going to plunge directly into my talk today. The title should be seen as a double meaning. Of course, there is madness as the object of surveillance, visual inspection, the attempt to codify modes of mental illness in terms of visual representation. But there's also, I think, maybe a reflection on visual studies itself, that we are mad about vision. Seeing itself is a form that vacillates between the rational inspection and the rational representation of what we see and a kind of out-of-control desire, scopophilia, voyeurism, the desire to see, and often to see that which we know we should not see or we should not show. So there is a kind of seeing madness that's built into the very discipline that we call visual studies. There's a double dedication to this talk, one to Miriam Hansen, my late lamented colleague in film studies at the University of Chicago, who gave me a lengthy tutorial on cinema and madness, which I'm continuing to work in very closely. And by the way, there is good news and bad news about this talk. The bad news is it's long. The good news is that it's not just me talking. There's a lot of film clips, which I will enjoy. The other person I'm dedicating this to, Miriam Hansen died 2 years ago at the peak of her career as a great film scholar. The other is my son, Gabriel Mitchell, who died about 18 months ago. He was a filmmaker whose project, he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in 1994, and he is making himself into a very talented filmmaker, mastering the technologies of cinema and video. When in the summer of 2012, schizophrenia overwhelmed him. And he fought a heroic struggle for 20 years against schizophrenia. And so this is partly, this whole project originated as background research for his filmmaking. Master text, the kind of Bible of the history of madness, Michel Foucault. A day will come when we no longer know what madness was. And I want to send you off to a reference as well. This website was created by Gabriel Mitchell. And if you want to review his film, it's there. Linked to YouTube. And many other works of art and other film excerpts are there. So, let's hope our technology is working. We can bring the lights down.
And also, because I think there's a lot of films that kind of misrepresent it.
It's interesting, cultures shape the experience of mental illness, whether you talk about depression or something like PTSD. How we think about it and how we treat it actually shapes the experience itself. So when we, as the globalizing culture in America, export our notions of mental illness in terms of how we treat it and how we think about it, we are inadvertently shaping those illnesses as well. And what we are doing by exporting our notions of mental illness around the world is we're homogenizing the way the world goes mad.
Even this week, the complicity of the American Psychiatric Association in the practices at Guantanamo Bay has been questioned. Whether doctors can be doctors and participate in these things. So a myth of brainwashing has being able to produce human automatons, people who will obey orders and assassinate on command. That's what Manchurian Candidate is about. It's a scenario that's been updated in the current American television series Homeland, and I'll have more to say about that later. Now this is mainly Western forms of madness. There would be a whole parallel seminar to look at non-Western material. We particularly spent some time with Frans Fanon's Psychopathology of Colonialism, which I think is a major text for looking at madness not in the imperial West, but in the colonial South, in countries that are subjected to imperial domination. Now, although a central focus of the course was on the spectacle of madness, visual culture, the surveillance of madness, we were equally concerned, and I think this is true as a principle for visual culture, it must be, equal concern with textual, discursive, and even musical mediations of insanity. I mean, imagine crazy talk without mad song. The music is crucial. So we read the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness, the DSM, on schizophrenia, alongside Deleuze and Guattari's essay Schizoanalysis. And we listened to Joan Sutherland's performance of the mad scene in Donizetti's Lucille de Lammermoor, a scene that confirms the widespread agreement that madness, especially female madness, is not just another topic for opera, but is in some sense foundational to the medium as such, with its emphasis on exaggerated emotional expression and oracular virtuosity. A feature that probably goes back to Greek drama and thinkers like Cassandra. Here's a clip of some opera experts speculating about this.
Here's a look at magazines and why we love them.
We could bring the lights down a bit.
Madness isn't something that just happens in operas the way it does in movies or other things. Madness is what opera is about. The highest compliment you can pay a performance is that it's demented. In Italy they have this term furore, which means a communal madness. That means everyone went crazy.
There are really three kinds of mad scenes. There's let's say an aggressive mad scene. The music is brutal.
Pure reason or your reason. I think of him as the personification of pure reason, a kind of Lear-like figure, the sovereign God, the demiurge, attempting to bring order into the chaos of the world, measuring, dividing light from darkness, and creating a geometrical structure for consciousness. Or reason as associated with the logos, with the book, with writing, and with annotations. This, I think, in visual culture studies, in its productive form. We turn out more books on the basis of proof. Why is it that madness in great ones must not unwatched go, as Claudius says of Hamlet? And why are mad kings and queens such a familiar topic? Does it have something to do with the nature of sovereignty itself? As the person, remember, as Agamben defines it, as Carl Schmitt first I think said, the sovereign is he who decides on the exception. The sovereign is the one who says, okay, the laws are suspended. Logic is suspended. I have to do something outside the law, beyond the law. Even our modest and moderate President Barack Obama has become one of the great murderers of our time. He authorizes on a daily basis drone strikes that he knows will kill innocent people. The sovereign position itself is a position which invites, maybe even necessitates, playing the role of a murderer, playing the role of the predatory beast. Okay, so now on to cinema. At the center of our inquiry is a series of films. These are the anti-psychiatry movement, the Bibles, I think, of them, the great quartet of anti-psychiatry hospitals. A terrific film showing the kind of optimism and hope that Lang brought into the world of mental illness, but also the limits of an idea that you could create a society of the insane. Lang's Asylum is a place where the limits of that hypothesis are shown. And cinema, right at its foundation, starts off with the asylum as the scene. With Dr. Caligari to the 1926 masterpiece by Tanisuke Kitagasa. I regard this as and a kind of joyful dimension. But to come back to the question of the Cold War and mutually assured destruction, what you might call the national security version of madness, I said I would come back to the Manchurian Candidates updating in the contemporary TV series Homeland. This is an exact kind of recoding of the Manchurian Candidate scenario beyond the Cold War. In our time, when instead of a Cold War, we have a war on terror. It involves the premise of a returning American soldier who has been turned into an enemy assassination by torture and psychological. That was the Manchurian Candidate story. It's slightly inflected with Homeland. The returning American GI has not been manipulated by psychiatry, but by good old-fashioned torture and kindness. And so he's been converted to Islam. So instead of brainwashing, we have religious conversion. The position of madness, of bipolar, obsessive-compulsive, has been transferred to the CIA in the form of its most gifted agent, played here by Claire Danes.